This is Adomako Man, and you are tuning in to the Producing Peace podcast, a podcast that celebrates the vibrant tastemakers shaping NYC's cultural landscape. From artists to activists, we spotlight individuals driving positive change and shaping the future of our city.
I'm sitting with an individual whose passion for brewing is matched only by his dedication to excellence. He has completed the prestigious Master of Brewer program and was honored with the Michael James Jackson Foundation Sir Geoff Palmer Award. His commitment extended beyond brewing, having served as a political officer at the Mission Against Corruption and Impunity in Honduras. Mbibi dubbed him Insatiable, a fitting title for someone who's earned a beer culture Bronx brewer internship. Additionally, he has completed a craft brewing certificate from Cornell University. These remarkable achievements belong to Rafael de Armas. Hi.
Hi.
Did I get that right?
You did. You did.
I'm glad to be sitting with you today.
I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah. So I want to first start off with where are you originally from? Where were you originally raised?
So I was born and raised in Venezuela.
Okay.
I was born in a small college town in the Venezuelan Andes called Mérida, which is high up in the mountains. My parents had me when they went to college. So it was clearly planned. That was part of the plan. First semester, have a kid.
First semester?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they haven't even started class when my mom got pregnant.
It must have been love.
That's one way to put it, yeah. As far as I know, they did love each other a lot for a while. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I was born while they were in college. So, but my entire family, most of my family is from the other side of the country. For your audience reference, Venezuela is on the northern part of South America, facing the Caribbean Sea, north, and the Amazon jungle, south, which for us is basically the Orinoco region. And to the west is the Andes and Colombia. So I was born in the Andes, closer to western Venezuela, and my family is from the Caribbean coast all the way in eastern Venezuela. And in Margarita Island is where my family comes from, and also Sucre, which is the state that is facing Margarita Island in the north. I don't know how much people want to know about that, but yeah. I'll give you the long story.
No, I mean, I'm interested. I think I feel like we live in this metropolis of like people from all different types of places, and like it's exciting to learn about them.
Oh, it's wonderful, and you know, and I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about what it means to live in New York City and what this city provides you with, but also what it requires of you. And one of the things that I love about this city is that you meet people who have ethnic backgrounds that you didn't know were possible.
Yeah. We're going to get to that, but I want to talk about Venezuela first a little bit more, just because I feel like it's important to highlight different types of cultures that live in this metropolis and this city.
Oh, yeah.
And like, so I'm interested in like, what was your upbringing like? And after you were born, did your family move back to or did you stay in the Andes area?
I stayed in the Andes for a while, but then I spent a lot of time with my grandparents because, you know, my parents were in college. So that meant that I was going basically back and forth between the Andes and Oriente and the Caribbean coast. And those are two very different regions of the country.
I'm sure.
Like, I mean, I know you've been to Colombia, you've been to different parts of places in Colombia, and you can see the difference between, you know, when you're in the Caribbean coast versus what you are in the Andes. In the case of Venezuela, it might not be as pronounced as you might find in a place like Colombia, because we don't have big metropolis in the Andes. Like the cities and towns that we have in the Andes are smaller compared to what Colombia has, which is, you know, the capital region, for example, and Bogota. But yeah, I was going back and forth between two very different regions of the country in terms of accents, in terms of climate, in terms of food, but all still within, you know, the same broader Venezuelan culture.
What's the distance between those two spaces? Cities.
It's about 1,100 kilometers, so it's pretty long. No, I'm kidding. It must be under 1,000 kilometers.
Because you have to be going back and forth, so that sounds like a lot of time.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're doing a road trip, you could be driving for 18 to 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, Venezuela is a bit larger than Texas, just to put it in perspective. So it would be like going from one end of Texas to the next.
Texas is huge.
Yeah,
to get through Texas takes like 3 days.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It's similar in Venezuela. But the country is kind of weirdly shaped as a like a triangle in a way, because most of the population live along the coast. That's where the main cities are, and in the south is jungle and savanna. Beautiful, really beautiful, but it's sparsely populated.
Then what was your upbringing like in Venezuela? Like, how long did you live there until you left?
So most of my life, all my college education, for a short period of time, for about 2 years, less than 2 years, but I live in Cuba. When my parents divorced, my mom took me and my siblings to live in Cuba.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and her plan was to stay there indefinitely, but that didn't work out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how long were you there for then in Cuba?
Almost 2 years.
2 years, and that was it. And then you went back to Venezuela?
Yeah, I went back to Venezuela in my teens. That period of time in Cuba was really interesting to me because I was leaving everything behind after a divorce. Right, so I'm leaving friends, and leaving family, and leaving the girlfriend that I had at the time, which was a big deal for me. Not knowing what to expect, because at that point I have never left the country before. That was my first time traveling overseas too.
What did that feel like for the first time?
I mean, I was really excited just to get to see other places. But most countries in that region are geographically and culturally similar.
Okay.
I mean, there's big differences, obviously. But it is not. You're not going to a place that you're gonna suffer a big cultural shock necessarily.
Because it's like hot, like
right.
People speak Spanish,
and people kind of, especially along the Caribbean. Like if you hang out with people from the Caribbean, the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. We're very similar, and you can basically eat the same things with different names, and there's little variations here and there. But you feel at ease. It's not something that it's really foreign to you. But it was nonetheless a big shock to me at the time because I was a teenager, and I just is that time in your life when you're forming your identity. So the things that you own, the things that you want, they feel like they're part of you, and that you can't live without them. And that might be a pair of sneakers to your records or whatever. But yeah, after that we went back to Venezuela, and then we switched cities. Caracas, Merida, Cumaná, like going back and forth different places. It took a while for us to resettle in a way. Going back with my mom now as a single parent, and my two siblings who are considerably younger than I am because they were planned. So it took a while to get our bearings. And then it was basically time for me to go to college. So I decided to go to Merida, which is where I was born, and where I had all these fun memories of growing up in that college town, going to the same university that I eventually ended up attending. Because that's the place that when I think about home, that's the first place that comes to mind. even though most of my family is from the Caribbean coast, and I do feel that place as my own in many more ways that I do the Andes. But when I think about childhood home, and when I think about home, the first thing that comes to mind is Merida. Yeah.
So then why leave home? Like what was or rather like, but I'm gonna reframe the question, because I just read that you were in Honduras. How did that happen?
Okay, well let's fast forward a couple of years.
Okay.
Out of college, I was working in a project with indigenous peoples in Venezuela with my professor at the time. It was my first job out of college. It was just going to these territories and you're working with the indigenous communities. Then after that, and a series of ups and downs in Venezuela, including a short period of time in which I worked for the Venezuelan government. I got a job offer to work in Washington, D.C. At an international organization on a project that was dealing with, back then, they were talking about, these early signs of, democratic backsliding in the region. And what that means is that the quality of democracies is receding. Like, democracies are always vulnerable to attack, but it felt at the time that there was a lot going on politically that might undermine the integrity of democracy itself. So I ended up working in for this research project, and what was initially going to be like a three-month long contract ended up becoming my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
so I worked for this organization at different capacities and within the political affairs category, subsecretary within this organization. And then because of political turmoil and the particularities of the political situation in Honduras, there was a need for a call from civil society in Honduras for an international mission against corruption and impunity.
You sound like a spy. Like, this sounds
not at all. No.
Like, this sounds like you have like a red light thing. I'm just, anyways, continue.
No, I mean, it would have been the most boring spy job on the planet. But anyway, so it all began in Honduras. There's not a single issue that created this crisis in Honduras that ended up with civil society demanding an international mission. But in a neighboring country, Guatemala, the United Nations had established a mission whose purpose was to help bring justice after the conflict. And because Guatemala had gone through a very painful civil war, and justice was so politicized that the political actors could not agree on how to.
I love how you say political actors.
how to implement justice. So the solution was to call upon the UN and to bring a bunch of international experts and establish a process in which this organization would review very sensitive cases so that people doing the research and people investigating those cases could actually do their job without fear of either political violence or political pressure.
Oh my God, it sounds,
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
And it's a painful story that had a lot of success in Guatemala, but it has a sad ending. In Honduras was something similar. So people were calling for, let's get an international mission so that we could do this, because this country is so corrupt and we have so much impunity, especially in case of political violence, that there's no guarantee that we ever going to solve those cases. And so the organization that I was working for was called upon to come up with this mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of the first wave of people going to Honduras to work on that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. You sound like, I mean, like a spy soldier, like, but you know, I respect everything that you've done during that time because it
Yeah.
led you to here.
Thank you.
And so
I think so too.
so I mean,
Yeah.
so I'm curious to like get into like how you. So I guess you originally first then went to DC.
Oh yeah.
And
I lived
then
in DC for 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
And then what was that experience like coming from like the Caribbean, South America
Yeah.
to then going to DC? Did you like DC?
I did.
Okay.
I
Because
know
I don't know, sometimes
DC gets a lot of hate, but think about this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a local population of DC who are local natives.
Do you
right?
know the group, the Check It?
I do not.
You should look into the Check It.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will. And then, DC is a very unique city in the sense that every 4 years, there's a new batch of people coming in, a new batch of people leaving the city.
I've never thought of it that way.
And there's usually a very specific demographic.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually little variation in terms of the types of career that people who wish to live in the sea study.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually little diversity in terms of the universities where they come from, the regions of the country where they come from,
Mm-hmm.
and their political affiliations as well. They're very much marked.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of idealists in the sea as well, along with some really awful people. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But you can make the same argument about New York.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, New York is to finance to what DC is to politics. Yeah. So if you have a vision of New York that is that of Wall Street and Midtown, it would be very easy for people to have a bad idea of what New York City is like.
Mm-hmm.
DC is not as complex as New York City is, but you have the same issues of the perception that people have about DC is that of downtown DC, International Organization of the Federal Government. There's an entire DC culture that most people miss because they never leave the area in which they're supposed to be at.
Oh yeah, I've been to DC a few times. I mean, one thing I feel like everything does come down to politics, even in the hood,
yeah.
even in like downtown.
Yes.
But then, so when did you move to New York then?
After coming back from Honduras.
Okay.
So my partner originally was gonna go to Honduras and meet me there.
Mm-hmm.
But then she had been applying for jobs. I mean, she started the application process for a job with the UN, and that takes forever. But she go through all the different stages, and so she obviously took that job in New York, and I went to Honduras, and I stayed in Honduras, and then I was coming back and forth between Honduras and New York, and then after Honduras, when I decided that I was gonna leave Honduras, I came to New York City. That was about 2016, I want to say.
2016?
I think so.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it's like 8 years you've been here.
Yeah, I think it was 2016, 2017. Maybe. Yeah, I think that it's around that time.
And you've been here ever since?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And how has it been for you?
New York's been good to me.
That's good.
It's been good to me in many levels, right? And it has allowed me to get to know myself better. And I think with New York City, in my experience with other people who are not from here, who come to New York City, there's an immediate reaction of whether or not you're gonna like the city as soon as you step into New York. New York will not allow you to ignore it, right? So it's right there. It's too much, and either you like that first impression or you don't. I feel that's the first filter for people who are not from here,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I definitely experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had the very privileged position of being able to get to know the city because I wasn't working. So I got to ride my bicycle around the city a lot. I got to walk. I got to go different places and experience the city beyond the rush hour,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then because I was so drawn to the city and to what it has to offer, I kept trying to, go different places and try different things and go different neighborhoods and I I'm in love with the city
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is not blind love. It's a choice. It's
I love that.
yeah, I'm not infatuated with New York, and I feel like I can criticize New York because I know how I love New York,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm part of the city now,
Mm-hmm.
and so I get to criticize it as much as I love it.
No, you're not from here. You can't do that.
I know.
I mean, you could do anything you want. But so was there ever a point where when you were working in politics in New York City, or you kind of
I no,
escaped that?
I did a couple odd jobs, like writing a few papers
Mm-hmm.
and articles, basically. And I had a couple of meetings with, a couple organizations, especially dealing with the situation in Venezuela. So I did that kind of type of job for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely knew that I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing before.
And that was actually how. I don't know if that
That
was
that's how we
was
met.
that around the same time.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
wow,
yeah,
yeah. Because I don't know if I told you this. Like before I met you, I noticed you. Did I tell you this?
no,
And it was I was walking to set, and it was raining. It was raining that day.
yeah.
And I remember I saw you riding your bike or riding a city bike. I don't know if it was one of the two, but
Well, probably city bike.
you was
Yeah.
riding a bike in the rain, and I was just like so like
Yeah.
fascinated by you riding your bike in the rain. And then and then afterwards we were on set, and then we just started talking,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's how. So that was around that time.
yeah. That was around the time. Yeah,
Wow.
and those were the days of walking around the city and getting to experience the city in that way.
Wow.
Yeah,
Do you remember what it was like your first day you was here? Like what that feeling
because
felt like?
I had been here before,
Okay, true.
for just to visit, just to get to know the
Mm-hmm.
city.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely coming to live was a different feeling because now I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, now I get to open the door and go wherever I want to go and see the city at whatever pace I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're visiting, you like about 24 hours or just for the weekend or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you just spend most of your time trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And now I was like, okay, now I live here. I get to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I get to experience it.
What is something that you wished you knew um, when you first arrived here? Like now that you've lived here for 8 years.
Oh, so that's a good question. Um, let's see. Nothing specific comes to mind, and I think I'm having trouble with the question because now it's very difficult for me to relieve that feeling of not knowing the city.
Mm.
Because, and again, I think the city has a way of, you know, getting to you.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, becoming part of your identity. That is difficult for me to think of a time when I didn't know the city the way I know it now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think one thing that I would have been useful to know maybe is that a longer commute is not necessarily a bad thing if you are in a neighborhood that you love.
I mean, sometimes I struggle with that because, like, when you commute from the Bronx to like all the way to like Flushing or whatever, it's
Yeah,
like,
but that's by
yeah.
design also, which is one of the few characteristics of the city, that one of those structural reminders of all the urban problems that we have as a consequence of discrimination and redlining and Robert Moses.
I mean, yeah, that's an interesting that's an interesting way of thinking about it. Like, basically about distance and loving your neighborhood and going the distance for what you love.
Yeah. I mean, for a short while, I mean, almost, I don't know, almost a year maybe, I was working at Montclair Brewery, Montclair, New Jersey. And I did not love that commute. Especially when you have to deal with New Jersey Transit.
Yeah. Did you drive or how did you?
No, I don't own a car.
Okay.
I would have ridden my bicycle, but it was really impossible.
In the rain.
In the rain.
I
did commute on my bicycle for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And rain, snow, hot heat wave, or no snowstorm. Once you get used to it, and you kind of enjoy it. Yeah. I know it sounds weird, but yeah.
No, I mean, I usually bike during this time, and I'm like, just because, for one, I do not like taking the train, and then I also see it as like a way of exercise, and I like to see the city that way.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know, people should not be doing this, but I will listen to music as I'm biking.
I mean, as long as you're using just one headphone and keep one ear.
I'm sorry, I live life on the edge. Both headphones are going in.
Full volume.
Full volume, listening to like a Gold Room playlist or something. But then, so, a little bit after the time we met, you then eventually started learning about brewing.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means for someone like me who doesn't even know much about beer? And we have a whole bunch of stuff here today.
Oh, yeah, we're going to try some beer.
Yeah, I'm going to be drunk by the end of this conversation.
So I was already a home brewer. And I got into that because a friend of ours, he gave me some of his homebrew as a present one time. And I'm somebody who likes to drink beer. I always have. And I was not really keen on trying some homebrew because, my rationale at the moment was like, I mean, beer's already good there. Why would I drink your homebrew? Like, it's gonna
like eating someone's, like, you don't eat everyone's like home cooked meal,
right? But even worse, because if somebody offers you a home cooked meal, there's a pretty big chance that that person knows how to cook.
Yeah.
In most cases, like if you're confident enough that
That's
you're gonna
true.
have somebody else that come try my X thing that I made, that's not necessarily the case with homebrew. Because beer is very simple, but it's also very complicated.
Yeah.
And you can screw it up really easily if you don't know what you're doing. And this usually homebrews usually give me an upset stomach, and they don't taste really well. And so I tried that homebrew that my friend gave me, and I did not love it. But then a year later, we go to visit him. And they live in the suburbs of Philly, so they got space in the basement, and he had his homebrewing set up in the basement, and he had a lot of different bottles of beer that he had been brewing over the years, and it was actually good, quite good.
He's gotten better.
Oh yeah. And to me, that was kind of a revelation in the sense that, if you do this and if you learn about this, you can make your own beer that is good beer. And if you like beer, that prospect is fantastic. So he actually took me to a homebrew shop supply and bought me my first homebrewing kit.
And that's where it began.
That's where it began. Yeah. And then when I brew in Washington D.C. a couple of times, and always trying to brew beers that I would like to drink, not knowing. I mean, compared to what I know now, I obviously had no idea what I was doing. And I go back and see my notes of the recipes that I was brewing and all that stuff, and I see the comments that I made, and I think, oh, I knew nothing. I knew nothing. I still don't.
You like
brewing,
have like all these like degrees.
but I think, especially brewers, you need to acknowledge that you are going to be trying to perfect your craft constantly. And if you settle for the fact that, oh, I'm a master brewer, I know what I'm doing, your beer is going to suffer as a consequence. Your quality is not going to be as good as it could be. You're going to plateau. You're going to be just repeating the same recipes over and over again and just hoping that that's enough. And that's not what I want to do.
I was listening to a conversation you had, and you said that you don't think that like beer can be innovative. Is that correct? Like I remember you were saying, like
you did your research.
I mean, I'm always going to. So, do you still stand by that?
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
But let me expand on that idea.
Sure.
So the thing is, when I see a lot of breweries and brewers talking about innovation, and what they usually mean by that is just adding a different thing to something that already exists. That is not innovation. I mean, being generous with what they're doing, and I'm not saying all the breweries, but it seems to be a trend. I would say, best case scenario, they're doing iterations of very established beer styles, but not necessarily innovation. But I do see innovation in the beer industry, even when it comes to recipe development. I do see innovation in other aspects of the beer industry, not necessarily when it comes to new beers, but innovation in brewing, especially in craft brewing, is a very rare thing to find, and when you do, you appreciate it a lot. So I think that what I was referring to all the time is the fact that a lot of breweries, in best case scenario, are doing iterations of style and calling it innovation because they add in things that normally wouldn't go into beer, like Rice Krispies and Swedish Fish and all. So that's not innovation. That's just playing around. And to me, and what I was referring to all the time, innovation means you need to know, you need to have a solid, strong base of knowledge and practice to be able to do classic beer styles consistently and up to standard, so that you can then add whatever is your own flavor palette, whatever is your own cultural background into that. And that to me is a sign of innovation. It's when you're able to master a technique consistently so that you can add to it whatever is part of your own cultural background.
I mean, I'm not a beer drinker. I don't really drink. I don't even really participate in like smoking weed or any of that stuff. Not that those two are the same or different or whatever. And so I'm curious, like, is there, because with, I feel like I'm going to sound so uncool, with marijuana or weed, ganja, Mary
the devil's
J,
lettuce.
The devil's lettuce, however people name it. Like people are finding new ways to like, put it in, I mean, like brownies has been a thing, like CPD or like oils and all that other stuff. And then people are finding it a way to make it a lifestyle, to make it healthy. Can beer be a healthy drink?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it can.
In what way?
So beer's mostly 97% water. If you drink and if you drink beer with low alcohol percentage and drink them as you can drink them as hydration, basically.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And there's actually a lot of people for whom beer can be. I mean, you can make beer like an isotonic drink in the sense that um, it's good for rehydration, especially after a workout. So if you drink,
Really?
yeah, if you drink non-alcoholic beer after a workout, that's wonderful for you because you got good sugars in there. You got some left, well, like the carbonation really helps with the quench your thirst, and it's tasty.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because growing up, I used to associate beer with The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because of Homer Simpson, he would always drink beer. And so, and then like, and then my father used to drink beer like Heineken. I think I might have like snuck a drink when I was younger, and I was like, this is not my vibe. And so,
Yeah.
so we'll try. Like, I guess we could start, but yeah, I'm giving you a warning. Like, I'm not.
I know,
Yeah.
and that's the reason why we have so different beer styles here.
Okay.
You will see in terms of carbonation, taste, color, acidity. These beers are very different from each other.
Okay.
And the good thing about beer, one of the many good things about beer, is that the range of flavors is very wide. And I think that even if you're not a beer drinker,
Mm-hmm.
there's a beer out there that has a combination of flavors that you might enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we might find one here. If we don't, I'll promise to keep trying with other set of beers. But
yeah.
And going back to the point you were making before, for example, this beer style, this is a Belgian farm ale.
Okay.
Farmhouse ale. That was used as refresher for people who used to work in the farms. So instead of drinking water, you would drink that.
But I would imagine with that being like something you use on the farm, like it's supposed to be like a relaxer, like so like there's a little pep in your step when you drink, so I could see why.
But then you have low alcohol percentage.
Okay.
Very tasty. Mm-hmm. Very refreshing because it has a lot of carbonation. So on a hot day, you work in the farm and you drink that. I'm pretty sure the must have felt a lot tastier than just water.
Okay.
So let's give this beer a try.
Yeah.
Starting with an unfiltered Belgian farmhouse ale.
Okay.
This is the beer style that farm workers used to drink.
Okay.
That's how it came to be. This particular one, Saison du Pont, it's considered to be like the gold standard for this beer style.
I'm honored.
I mean, I wouldn't have brought you anything that I didn't know was. So I think that might be enough for you for now.
That's a. I'm gonna. Are you're participating, right?
I am.
Okay. This is. Okay, so do I sip on it or do I?
Okay, smell it.
Okay. I smell it.
What do you get?
It smells like every other beer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It smells like a hint of like white wine, but
yeah.
Oh, so I'm right.
You're right.
Okay. Oh wow! So we're drinking now.
See.
Okay.
Yeah. So just try it.
Okay.
You should be getting. I mean,
it's not hard.
No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see how, after working a farm, you drink this.
It's cold.
Yeah, you see, there's a lot of carbonation in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to be refreshing, but you also should be getting some earthy notes.
It just feels like it literally, like I said before, my palate is not like open. Like maybe I need to open it. I don't know, but it has that beer vibe, but it's not like so like hard.
Yeah.
And I'm like a soft guy at the end of the day. Like I would drink this. Like this is a drink I would drink just cause. Like if you were like, hey, let's have a beer, I'm like, okay, and I wouldn't like. I'm not.
Now, this beer,
Mm-hmm.
um, you see how you get some peppery aftertaste? Do you get that or
No.
no?
Like
Okay.
peppery in what way? Like pepper?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Take another sip.
Okay, pour me another sip.
With that in mind,
Okay.
just
Try to get me drunk. No. I told you.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Okay, now it's a challenge because let's switch to another beer.
okay. I told you. I'll finish this. What the hell?
Me too.
Like, no.
We're gonna go to a different mouthfeel.
Okay.
This is New York State's own Genesee Brewery.
Okay.
This is a cream ale.
What does that mean?
So this is a uniquely American and New York beer style, actually.
I'm a New Yorker, born and raised, but I don't know.
So you'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
And because you have that taste of the Saison du Pont fresh in your mind,
Okay.
try this.
Okay.
And again, smell it.
I don't like the smell of this one. I like the smell of the other one a little bit more.
It's very different.
Yeah, it is. I don't know.
But you see how different it is in terms of how the dryness.
Something about it tastes like fruity.
Which I gotta say, it shouldn't. I should check the date on this because I do get. Yeah, because I'm getting an off flavor that we shouldn't be getting there.
Are you serving me expired beer?
Looks like it. Yeah, you see.
Oh my God, you're serving me expired beer.
You
said that you were serving me the best.
I'm gonna make it up to you.
Okay.
With the next beer we're gonna try.
Okay.
Do you get certain sweet aroma in there, kind of like butter popcorn?
I don't know. Hold on.
There's a lingering sweetness that you could be that we're actually getting from this beer. That's enough flavor. It should not be there. Mm-hmm. That means this beer was either not stored properly or it's been on the shelf for too long.
What does that mean?
So beer is an agricultural product in the end. So there's many things we do to try to keep it in the best possible conditions. But once the beer leaves the brewery, you're not guaranteed that the beer is going to be kept at a steady temperature. There's not going to be going through ups and downs in temperature or pressure or mishandle, or you can actually make mistakes when you're packaging it and create oxidation. So beer can deteriorate pretty quickly if you do that.
Is it best to drink beer at a brewery then?
Usually.
Okay.
The fresher you can get it for certain beer styles,
okay,
the better. But then there's other beer styles like this one.
The packaging looks really cute.
It is. Or this one. Those are beer styles that can last a lifetime. And when I tell you a lifetime, like 20 years. And in fact, some of those beer styles get better with age too. And the flavor profile changes as a consequence of that. Okay, let's take the flavor off our mouth. This right here, it's a classic German Pilsner.
Okay.
We brew this at KCBC. In fact, I think I brew this beer.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Oh my God. That's.
This is the beer that tastes like beer.
Yeah, I get that vibe strongly. Yeah.
But if you also see it, is a lot lighter and easier to drink than the one we were drinking before. But again, with this beer, you're still technically within, beers that taste like beer.
Like I could taste the difference, but it still tastes the same.
Yeah. Now
Okay.
you're gonna try something that beer style that most people don't know.
Okay.
This is a smoked beer.
Smoked?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that the malt that we used
to malt.
The malt that we used to make this beer
Okay.
has been smoked.
Okay. It's giving like a coffee vibe.
Oh yeah. In terms of color, but you'll see.
Okay.
Now smell this.
It smells like steak or something.
Yeah. It should smell like kind of like bacon.
Yeah. That's what it is. Is it gonna taste like bacon? Because I'm not a fan of bacon.
Then you're in for a treat.
I don't. Hold on. Is it mixed with bacon?
But it.
So is there pork in this?
No. But I mean, it goes well with pork.
You see? I'll finish it.
This beer style. You don't have to. This beer style, it's from a region of Germany. It's called Franconia. The main city in that region is Bamberg. That's where this beer style comes from. And it was a happy accident how they came up with this beer. And then, it's very niche, very local. And it's one of those beers that it might take a while for you to get used to it. But once you do, you kind of crave that flavor.
It tastes like this particular drink tastes very masculine. Like it feels like you eat it and you like eat a lot of food. Like you eat it with a brisket and like BBQ food. Like
you absolutely could do that.
Giving.
You should. Yeah. You could definitely do that. But I can tell you for a fact, you will see a lot of women in that region of Germany drinking this beer just as a drink, not necessarily as part of having a big meal or whatever. But yeah.
And you went to study in Germany.
I did.
And what was that like for you?
I mean, it was super interesting. Germany is one of those countries that have like a big beer and drinking culture, right? It's not, and this might piss some people off, but to me, it's not as important as the Germans would like to think that their beer drinking culture is.
What do you mean?
Because most of the imagery that we have about beer is that of southern Germany. So the people with lederhosen and the 1 liter stein of beer, like the one you have over there. The pretzel and the sausages. And I think that has a lot to do with German migration to the United States and the industrialization of beer in the United States as a practice of German immigrants. Then they incorporated their own drinking culture into American culture, and then by extension, the perception of the beer culture is that of Germany. Germany, because it's not the country that drinks the most beer per capita in the world, even though they were for a couple of years, for a long time actually. But most people, when you think about beer, when you think about breweries and the activities that the breweries tend to gravitate towards are that of German drinking culture.
Yeah, I mean that was one thing we did when me and my gang went there. Did you go to Berlin?
I did.
Okay.
Not on this trip, but I've been to Berlin a couple of times.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's very different from southern Germany too.
I'm sure.
Like Bavarians are a country of their own.
Uh-huh.
And that's where most of the imagery of German beer drinking culture comes from southern Germany, which is where I went to study.
Before we continue with our conversation, here's a clip from the film Peace.
You what? Always, and to the day I die.
Lambic.
Lambic.
Lambic, what does that mean?
So lambic is a style of beer from Belgium.
Okay.
That is brewed very differently from every other beer that we've had thus far.
Okay.
It's got a different aging process. It uses a different type. It makes use of naturally occurring bacteria to ferment.
Mm-hmm.
And that bacteria is only present in a specific region in Belgium.
It looks pretty.
And you'll see, and then this beer is actually aged for a long time.
Okay.
At least 1 or 2 years, so that it can be considered lambic. And a lot of fruit is added because this is a sour beer that ferments in the bottle.
I'm scared now. You said sour. What, bottoms up?
Smell it.
Bottoms up.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, give it a try.
That's interesting.
It's very different from every other beer that we've had.
Yeah. This is probably something I could probably do.
There's an entire family of beers that are wild fermented.
This doesn't even taste like beer.
No, but that's the thing. It is beer, and again, it goes to show like how, like the variety of flavors that you can get within the beer family.
Mm-hmm. Like this is something I would drink in the summer.
Oh yeah,
this is like a summer.
In fact,
but maybe a little bit colder because I guess we're sitting here now. But
right,
I could drink
when it's colder. It's you're supposed to drink it like room temperature.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
what do you think about this?
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it, and I mean this brewery and this beer style sometimes gets a lot of hate because like the purists when it comes to lambic beers. This is a very popular lambic style.
I mean, it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
What would you say is like your palate? Like, what kind of beer do you like?
I don't have a favorite beer style.
Okay.
And my go-to beer is whatever beer I'm drinking at the moment. Because
okay, what are you drinking right now?
Mostly things like this.
Of course, that's where you are. So that makes sense, and you're making it.
Because in the summer,
very masculine drink.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I know nothing about beer, but I feel like this, like I don't know. Every time like just drinking in general, I'm always like I want to drink juice.
Yeah.
And if anything but I don't know. So.
Because you know what, some of the best brewers that I know are women who love this beer style, this type of beer, and especially women in this industry have to deal with so much, and like I feel that if we can take the stigma of beer as a masculine thing, and frame it as what one could argue actually is a drink that is for everyone.
This leads to my next question. Because you have like this radical, like, which I've always admired about you, is like you have like this radical, like, I'm gonna fight the power and I'm gonna like bring harmony and peace. You are a Libra.
I am.
What does it feel
Yeah.
like to be a Libra?
I
What
am.
does it feel
Yeah.
like to be a Libra? Do you want world peace?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I do want world peace. But I'm probably the worst person to talk about astrology in the world.
Do you know about astrology?
I know that it doesn't work.
I mean, when I speak to you, you say things. I'm like, that is such a Libra thing to say.
May I pour some more of this drink?
Sure, why not? Just liquor me up.
Listen, okay. Here's my thing with astrology. There's many things about astrology that I could go on and on about what I don't like about astrology.
Of course.
However, I'm going to say something about astrology that I think, to me, speaks to our common human nature,
Like to see connection.
in a way. But it's also the fact that when we talk about astrology and you see patterns of behavior, and people see themselves within a particular sign, because signs are arbitrary, and
Yeah.
they've moved throughout the years and depends on. So if they had an actual effect on you, it would have been the same throughout time, right? But when people see themselves in those, within the characteristics of those signs, and they recognize their own behaviors in there, to me that speaks to our commonality. We have so much more in common than we like to think, because we're constantly thinking about, oh, this speaks to me. I mean, look how special I am, because this is me. Okay, how could this thing know what I'm going through or what I'm thinking about? What if it has to be my own special connection with the universe?
Yeah.
And yes, but it's I mean, no, but it's we all share that connection.
Yeah.
And what you've seen of yourself reflected in there is something that everyone else is seeing, but we're not seeing that in each other.
I feel like astrology is like something to just entertain for fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, at the end of the day, I'm not religious or anything like that, but I do have my own special relationship with God. And so, like, God is like it for me to a degree. And it's okay for people not to believe,
Right.
or people to have whatever. And so, I don't know, when it comes to astrology, it's always exciting to see, like, what is a Libra like, or what is a Gemini like, And so knowing you over the years in our conversations, I'm just like, first of all, you're so fascinating. Like anything you say is always just so fascinating.
Thank you.
And then, you're like, one thing that you said that I thought was really interesting was, because one word that I always have a hard time with is the word exotic. And, when you were giving your explanation of what exotic was, do you want to share what your explanation? Do you remember what you said?
I think so.
Do you need me to remind you?
Sure.
You said when it comes to exotic, like when something exotic to you, when you have it for the first time, it's no longer exotic.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is so cleverly put. Because sometimes people will be like, for me, I exist as an indigenous person from West Africa and all these other identities. And, that people will be like, that's exotic. And I'm just like...
To you, because
right,
you don't know it.
Because I lived this experience.
Yeah.
So, I just... Yeah.
And how problematic the concept of something being exotic can be, because in the broader general culture, it usually refers to something that is of indigenous nature,
Mm-hmm.
ethnic,
Mm-hmm.
from a minority, and dude, it's not. It's is the standard, is the common thing for millions of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever
Mm-hmm.
you consider exotic, just have the decency of understanding that your own point of view is shaped by your own cultural circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
and other people live life differently than you, and that's okay, because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more that we have in common, that things we don't.
Mm-hmm.
But learn to appreciate things that are exotic to you, because they will stop being exotic when you get to know them, but you need to be able to know them,
Mm-hmm.
because you might interact with something forever
Mm-hmm.
and consider that thing you're interacting with as exotic, because you're not changing your relationship to that thing,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not
Mm-hmm.
allowing yourself to know that thing other than with the limitation that you approach it and the first time you encounter that,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you shared that perspective. Yeah. You're just so is that the last one we're trying? Or are we trying another one?
Oh, we're trying another one.
Let me finish this.
So fair warning,
Oh.
this is a sweet cherry sour.
Okay.
This is barrel aged.
I don't know what
So
that
that
means.
means that the beer then sat in a barrel for at least 2 years.
Oh.
Look
So
at
that
that
means it's
color.
like potent? Like it's
You'll see.
okay.
And it has a lot more tartness to it and acidity than this beer had.
Oh.
But smell that. Then you get that cherry, but also,
Like candy.
yeah, and also like the notes of the barrel in there. Anyway, I'm gonna give
Mm-hmm.
this a sip.
Okay. It feels like it's hiding behind something. Like there's the cherry,
Yeah.
and then the beer is just hiding behind it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. That's a very good description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it. I have a question, because once again talking about like your radicalness and your passions. Why do you, and I hope this doesn't sound any type of way, like what makes you care so much? Like I feel like there's a lot of care when it comes to, you know, people who are underserved, like in terms of people who come from Caribbean descent,
Yeah.
people who are queer, people who are black, people who are from South America. Like like when we talk, you always talk about, and it's not a performance, it's very much like I really care, and I just want harmony. Like what makes, like, where did that come from?
So I think because we live in the times we're living in, and I think every generation thinks this, right? The times we live in are so complicated, so unique,
Yeah.
and we are somehow at the center of whatever is happening, and every generation thinks that.
Absolutely.
Um, Not only is history happening for the first time when we encounter it, but we are at the center of what's happening in history, and because that's how history is taught too.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a long time for one to get a historical perspective on reality, and to be able to, I don't want to say understand, but at least see what's happening and recognize what's happening from a historical perspective as that is happening. What do I mean by this? And I'm going to link it to your question about, well, how and why do you care about these issues? it also goes back to, growing up between those two different places in the Andes and the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to the color of my skin, because Venezuela, like the vast majority of countries in Latin America, we've been socialized under this idea of we are all mixed race. So racial categories don't really apply to us because we're all mixed, so we're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, is true to a certain extent, and is not true for most of it, right? Especially for people who don't fit the ideal and the aesthetic of being mixed race, of that mestizaje. And indigenous communities and Afro-Latino communities suffer that considerably more than mestizo people in general.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, I was very much aware of the fact that people have assumptions about you based on how you talk and how you look and the color of your skin. And I grew up in a very politically aware family, and we were not just aware of whatever was happening within our own political context, but globally too. And just to have a perspective on the things that are happening in the global south, and the power dynamics between north and south, and developed and underdeveloped nations, and colonies and empires. And so there was always a critical read of the political realities. And one of the things that I've learned throughout the years and working in these issues too is one of the most revolutionary things that one can do is exercise tolerance. Because it's not, first of all, it's not easy. And then you have to think about, what do you tolerate and why? But I don't think that tolerating other people is enough, because tolerate just means you're okay you can stomach that being there. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think radical empathy requires so much more of you, but yields so much better results. And then, having been privileged enough to have had the career that I had, where I got to go to different countries and meet different people and experience different cultures, and where we were talking about the beginning before we went on camera about the influence that some people might have on you, that led me to, for example, if I want to understand a political context, I will go and read whatever people were writing at the time.
Right.
And then you see what movies were made at the time, and then you see what painters were there at the time. And it takes a lot of work to be able to, at least it did to me, and I cannot extrapolate my own experience to how other people might relate to this, but it took me a lot of time to get to the point in which I would consider in practice the idea that I already had in my mind, that everyone is equal. Because one thing is to have the ideal that, I think everyone is equal, and another thing is being able to put that into practice. Because putting that into practice means that you have to accept that whoever you're talking to is as deep, as complex, as full of contradictions as yourself. And that the things that make you and that you think make you special are the same for somebody else. it might not be the same issues, but it is the same level of intricacy, of complexity. And we don't see that in other people, especially the people we don't agree with. And that's why I make a point of trying to live up to what I think about myself. And, for the most time, I'm struggling to actually live up to that. But I know that this is not something that you accomplish and then you did it. This is something that you're constantly doing, because as you progress on these issues and your own understanding of yourself and your circumstances, you are also stretching the limits of who you are. So I hope that you never get to the point in which you're absolutely comfortable with who you are and what you do, that you no longer grow. If that makes sense. Because then once you think that you have reached understanding on certain issues, you're no longer able to keep up with reality, because reality keeps moving, expanding. It's ever complex. So stay flexible.
You are so you're such an intellectual. One thing I did wanted to ask you about, because I didn't realize it until, because right now I've been staying. Last time I saw you was on the street.
Yeah.
Saw you on the street biking.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we briefly talked about it, was there's a lot of refugees and things like that coming into New York City now, and they're residing in Randall's Island.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, if you care to share?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it is a tragedy. It's a human catastrophe that's happening.
I think there's 100,000 people staying on the island.
I wouldn't surprise me, especially because the vast majority of them are Venezuelans, like myself, and most of them went through really horrible things to get here. Crossing that area between Colombia and Panama, the Darien Gap, which is, really, really difficult to cross. And then that's just basically the beginning of the journey.
Wow. So those people there, because I think I started noticing this maybe 2 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was people from Guinea, people from Sierra Leone, and people from Venezuela, and maybe a few Dominicans that were there on the island. And I remember just walking. I was just curious to how are people getting here, and then walking there, and now I feel the story is getting bigger and bigger in terms of how people share space there, and how it's getting a little bit dangerous, how it's getting vital.
I mean, and I don't, this comment, I mean it in the best possible way.
And before you even start, I just want to say, when I say dangerous, for me, when people say, for example, one thing that really gets me upset is when I travel to underdeveloped countries, if you will, and people will say, oh, is it dangerous? I feel when people ask that question, it's dangerous for who?
Yeah.
So I think of that. So when I use that word, I'm just saying in terms of, violence that might be occurring.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right. Like violent crime for no reason. I mean,
or just out of survival.
I've had experienced that type of crime myself a couple of times. I've been robbed at gunpoint in different places.
You're such a survivor, a superhero.
And it's the sense of frustration that you get from being from experiencing that type of violence is really big, and I can see how it can easily lead to you having a strong reaction to whatever you think might be a threat, and how you can just justify violence against the other just because you feel threatened and you don't want to relieve that the sensation again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we have to practice like radical empathy
Mm-hmm.
and understanding of the circumstances, and then of other people's circumstances, but at the same time being very careful on your own safety and your communities.
Mm-hmm.
um, so Venezuela is a very dangerous country. There's a lot of criminality and there's a lot of violence, and traditionally that has to do with the large inequalities in the country, and that has to do with the impunity in the legal system. So when the big chunk of Venezuelan migrants got into New York City, you see all those markers of the socioeconomic dynamic that I recognize from Venezuela in the city, and then I see things that make me be more aware of my surroundings when I see those dynamics, because I experienced those dynamics in a country, in a context and in a country where that was actually unsafe for me. And that is something that is really unfair to most of the migrants, because you see that the narrative is that making the city more dangerous, which they're not.
Is that what's been being said?
Right. And if you take a look at the numbers, the impact is dismal, but the narrative is how dangerous all these migrants are. Just because we feel uneasy when we're walking down a poorly lit street and we see a group of men who look like they look. But then there's this aspect of the human tragedy that it is them being here, because nobody chooses to embark on that journey if they don't have to. And nobody chooses to live on those conditions unless they have to. And when it comes to the migrant crisis, we often are dealing with the consequences. We're not thinking about what is causing the migrant crisis. And I understand the argument of people saying, well, what causes the migrant crisis is not our responsibility. Why should we deal with that? And then, well, take a step back and look at it for what it is. Yes, our choices, and when I mean our choices, I mean the United States, play a big role in all those people coming here, and when they have to come here. It bothers me, and it makes me also really sad and upset.
Have you taken a walk on Randall's Island?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I used to go there because I'm nearby.
Yeah.
And it's sad because the loss of public and shared spaces is accompanied by, and paradoxically, it's accompanied by the restriction of movement for a lot of people. So we feel it as, oh, we're losing the ability to take a walk or run around Randall's Island.
Is that what people are saying?
Oh yeah. Because I mean, you go there, and you will see, sorry, you will see mostly men.
Yeah, usually it is a lot of men.
Because I think in Randall's Island it's just unaccompanied. It's mostly men.
Why is that?
Because they're putting families together as much as they can. But if you're a single man and you're a immigrant, they're not going to put you in the same facilities where the families are.
Right.
Most likely, you will go to a facility where there's all the single men,
Mm-hmm.
and there's naturally a lot of tensions in those spaces because whatever you put a group of humans in a contained space with limited resources and a rigid structure that does not reflect the way they interact with the world, there's conflict.
It sounds like a prison you just described.
Well, it is.
Wow.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you know, wow, let's I mean, you know, what I have to say is that like I remember going to Colombia and like, have you ever traveled to Colombia before?
I've been to Colombia, yes.
Okay. And like just I feel like that was when I was around a lot of Venezuelan people more than because you know it's right across the border.
Right.
And I cannot explain to you like the kindness that I've received from Venezuelan people while there. So if I can't contribute anything to this conversation of that, that's one thing that I definitely want to put in there.
Thank you.
Is you guys have always been kind. You know, I remember this one girl I used to work with, Valentina. Shout out to Valentina. She's a Venezuelan as well. And I remember I used to work with her at a PR firm. And, you know, my name's indigenous, Adomako, or if you want to say it traditionally, Adomako. They were like, oh, we need to ask him what his nickname was because she was like a Venezuelan girl and everybody else was like white girls working in that PR firm. And she was like, why do we need to ask him his nickname? Let's actually get to know him. Like, let's actually, you know, and she never told me that. Never. And I remember another girl, because there was a very small amount of like colored people there. Was another girl who was Asian, Shannon, shout out to her as well. And she was like, you know, Valentina spoke up for you before you even came into this office. You didn't even walk into the office and they were already like, oh, how can we give him a nickname? So for me, when it comes to Venezuelan people, you guys have my heart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've met a lot of people who have interacted with Venezuela throughout the years or have been to Venezuela at different times. And a lot of them have this experience of getting to know somebody for the first time, and then, you know, it happens in a lot of countries, but, you know, being invited to their home the first day they met, and then they end up staying there for a while, and then the mom and the grandma comes and they cook something, and then they go back and forth for a few years and they become like family.
Yeah.
I get a lot of friends who have that experience.
Have you been back since being here? Or?
Yes. I used to go back relatively.
You were so fancy going back and forth to New York and Venezuela.
I mean, we used to go back and forth relatively often. And then
is your partner Venezuelan as well? Okay. Oh wow.
But then the situation has deteriorated so quickly that there was last time we were in Venezuela was 2016, and then we went back this year for the first time.
Oh wow.
2016. Yeah.
Must have been really different.
It is. Yeah. It is. And it's also really sad because when Venezuelans, our generation, go back to Venezuela, we don't have anyone left there. So all of our friends are gone.
Like just they left, they've been there in Europe, they're in Colombia, they're in America.
Yeah. Spain, Argentina, Mexico. So there's basically no one.
Yeah.
They can go back and visit. You go see family, whatever family is left, because for most of us, our families are spread throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's close to a third of the Venezuelan population that has left the country in the last 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Over the last 10 years. Unfortunately, it's the third largest migrant crisis in the world.
Oh, wow. What is the first?
So you got Syria.
Okay.
For a long time was Afghanistan and Iraq, and I think it's now Syria, Ukraine, probably either Afghanistan or Venezuela. I don't recall the most recent numbers.
You're like a walking
And
history book. So
and then there's so many awful things. We're living through one of the worst periods of human history and conflict. And I know I don't say this lightly, and I know the devastation that World War One and World War Two caused, and the tensions throughout all the conflicts during the Cold War. But what's going on in Palestine, it's gonna be one of the most horrific things in human history
absolutely.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening at the same time that the crisis in Ukraine is happening, that the Venezuelan migrant crisis in comparison looks like something manageable, even though
predicting a World War III.
No, I'm not, and and I think, I mean, if that happens, that's it. That's the end of us. I don't think we would recover from a global conflict of that scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and let's try not to get into that mindset right
now.
Oh, now.
Of course. I mean, I'm such an optimist. I'm a pacifist. I want world peace. Let's do a prayer.
but think about the fact that a third of the Venezuelan population have left the country in the past 10 years. Most families are divided and separated, either divided politically or separated by geography and migration. The standard of living in Venezuela has declined considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela has seen social indicators that we haven't seen since the beginning of the 20th century. Like, basically, the country has collapsed, and that crisis in itself is horrible and is nothing in comparison to what's going on in the world, right?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say who bleeds harder. I don't like that argument at all.
And I share that. But it's just to put it in perspective of, it's just one of many horrible conflicts happening right now. And in the case of Venezuela, it's not because it's a conflict. It's because corruption and autocracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely. I mean, I'm very much into world peace. That's where I always come down. And, that looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
And so, and also, I mean, I also am to be logistically correct, if you will, because I don't like the word realistic, because I feel like what is really realistic? But I do believe that, that we need to have war in order to have peace. And so it's just like, you need to have love in order to have hate. It's like a balance. And once again, that's in my astrological situation. Are we trying another one, or are we done with trying them out?
Okay, so this is still within the Belgian beer family.
Okay.
But you will see it's very different from the other two beers that we had.
Okay.
So let's see.
Okay. I think you have a cup, right? Or do you not?
I do.
Okay. Lord have mercy.
Well, I hope that one of these beers.
There was some, I mean, this one right here.
Yeah. The Lambic. Okay.
This tastes similar to this. The smells.
Yeah, it's also with cherry,
Mm.
but try it.
Okay.
It's a lot drier, a lot sweeter.
Okay.
I prefer the acidity and the tartness of this beer of this
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a very tasty Belgian beer.
I think these three
Good
are
to know.
like
Good to know. I'll get you some more of this with different fruits so that you can
okay,
try different fruits with this.
because these three don't really taste like beers to me.
But again, they're beers.
Mm-hmm. They're nuanced. Is there like a healthy relationship with beer? Can people have a healthy relationship?
Oh yeah.
Because when I think, once again, like I said before, I don't really drink. I don't smoke. I'm kind of straight edge. Not really, but almost. And that's such a teenage thing to say. Excuse me. But sometimes people, I mean, I'm trying to find the most esteemed way to say this, but sometimes people will associate like the liquor industry as like being a bunch of alcoholics. How do
Right.
you counteract that idea?
Uh, when you take a look at hardcore beer fans,
Mm-hmm.
but the subset of hardcore beer fans that know about beer,
Mm-hmm.
you really don't want to get wasted. You want to taste and appreciate all the beers that you're drinking. So you know about which beers you should try first, so that you slowly progress into lower ABVs versus higher ABVs, and the mouthfeel and residual sugars, so that you can enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like getting drunk.
So you never get drunk?
No, I do. No, yeah, I do. But I don't like to get to the point in which it doesn't matter what I'm drinking,
Okay.
just because I'm drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to beer, and if I have a wide selection of beers that I like, I want to be able to taste all of them and drink all of them mindfully.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Do you participate in like the wine culture as well, or you're like, I'm a beer man?
I like wine.
Yeah.
I really do. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy wine a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but I think beer is better
Why?
because wine, you get grapes, you squash them, mix them with water, and it ferments. You got wine. Beer, on the other hand, is a lot more complex to make.
You like the drama?
I do like the drama of beer.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously, wine is also really complex, and there's nuances to it. But but beer is a communal effort. Beer is the first thing that we did when we settled, when we stopped being hunter gatherers. The first thing we did was beer, and we're still brewing beer 10,000 years later, right? Even more so. Um, and there's an aspect to engaging with nature and transforming basic ingredients into things, these complex things that I love about brewing.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I do enjoy wine, but I prefer beer.
It's so amazing how you've developed your relationship to the industry and to like the lifestyle of beer. I am curious to like your experience with Michael James Jackson Foundation,
Yeah,
and for people who might want to learn more about it to get their own
absolutely.
experience about
And
it.
and so I got the Michael James Jackson scholarship to do my master brewer program. And one thing about the MJF Foundation, well, Michael James Jackson was a beer writer and a whiskey writer, and we like the categories of beer, the modern understanding of beer categories and beer styles, we basically owe to Michael James Jackson and his writing. And he was also a very anti-racist person, right?
You are my favorite person.
and Garrett Oliver,
Mm-hmm.
who's the president of and founder of the foundation, who's also the brewmaster of Brooklyn Brewery, who is also the editor of the Oxford Companion to Beer and the author of the Brewmaster's Table. He is a key seminal figure in the craft beer industry, and he is a black man. And I remember the first time I came to New York City as a tourist, we did a tour of Brooklyn Brewery. That was the first brewery tour ever for me.
It was destiny.
I think it was destiny, yes. And at the end of the tour, they mentioned, well, our brewmaster, Garrett Oliver, blah, blah, blah. And I have I'm listening to the tour guide talk about, the brewmaster, Garrett Oliver. And then I see a photo of him in a book, and it struck me that he was a black man. And it made me really happy. Because here's this person at the forefront of the craft beer scene, writing all these books and being the brewmaster of Brooklyn Brewery, right? And now that I've gone through the MJF and I had the opportunity to meet him.
Wow.
I mean, he was in my interview when I was interviewing for the scholarship, and then you cannot believe that it's actually him talking to you, and you are basically making your case for why they should give you a scholarship. But all that just to say that a person that accomplished has taken the time to come up with this initiative to radically change the face of the craft beer industry. And the Michael James Jackson Foundation, for people out there who are intrigued or curious about the beer industry, check us out, because I'm now part of the MJF board.
Oh, wow. When did that happen?
Recently.
Congratulations.
Thank
you heard it here first.
Yes.
Wow.
And now I get to contribute to the selection of new candidates for scholarships.
You are so fucking cool.
I'm honored to be in that position and to work with that group of people.
A remarkable human being.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I guess this leads to my final two questions then, because I could talk. What, did we try all of them?
We did, and I don't think we. Oh, I think I have a West Coast IPA in there, but that's beer.
We can try that out later.
Okay, we can try that later.
There's
still some of this cherry beer here.
Let's let's pour it up.
Okay.
And then chop it up.
Yeah.
But this leads to my final two questions because this is how we do things here, how I do things here. What does expansion look like for you? Because that's such an amazing accomplishment. And I feel that that's a story, a testament to like having adversity and being a space where you're a minority. And if that makes sense in terms of like, I'm gonna show everyone what I can do.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I feel like you're a testament of that through all of your courageous life story. So what does expansion look like for you from here on out?
I would like to use beer and my space within the beer industry to bring more people of color in, but also to help people who think about their relationship with culture through beer, and they're mindful of beer's role as a cultural product. Um, and I'm very interested in workers' ownership of production facility, and I'm very interested in using beer to tell stories. And I think that beer usually, traditionally, it has been a reflection of the people brewing that beer, where they are located, their climate, their soil, their cultural practices, the ingredients they have available to them. Whether or not if they're in mountain people, they're sea people, beer reflects who they are. Because different beer styles have become the way that they are because of the limitations of or the access to the resources that they have. So, for example, one of the reasons why the Belgians use a lot of fruit in their beer is because their beers are open fermented, so that they ferment using the bacteria that's around, just like yogurt does, for example. And then the remaining sugar that they get from the fruit reignites that fermentation, so that it continues to ferment in the bottle. That is unique to them, because what they had available, how they brew beer. And that same thing happens all over the world. So expansion to me looks like being able to contribute to the creation of spaces where we have brewers that are mindful of those issues, and that they have a place to express themselves through beer. Yeah. And one thing that I would really like to see and work towards, which is part of the work that we're doing with the Michael James Saxon Foundation, is precisely that, of bringing more people of color, but also bringing people with different backgrounds. Because if you're mindful about your background, if you're aware of your background, in the sense that, we're all aware of our own backgrounds, but if you're conscious of what it means to be you, and how you got to be who you are, because you're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before you, and you reflect on how the people that came before you came to be who they were, and the circumstances that they went through, then I think that's gonna reflect on the beer that you brew. Not because you're gonna be following a recipe of the brewery that you work at, because when you have the opportunity to do the thing that you do and work in the brewery, some of who you are will transfer to what you do.
Absolutely.
So I very much would like to be part of that.
One of the Eddie Asante, whose episode's coming out this week, he said that smiles come from the way up. Like, basically, like, the person on top who creates everything has to be smiling, and for it to all the way come down. So I would imagine that's the same thing when it comes to creating beer. It's like you're creating something that tells stories, and that's a strong story, but it comes from all the way from the top for it to trickle on down.
Yeah, and again, one of the things that the MJF is looking to do is just to get us to positions of decision making within the beer industry, because you get the technical education and experience and the network of support to go out there and be in a position to make decisions about production, about how we do things, and who we bring in. And that's also, like, I would like to make a really strong case for members of the LGBTQ plus community to get into the beer industry is because I get the hesitation, but just know that this is also yours.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bring yourself into the industry, you are helping everyone improve the industry itself.
I think, are you talking towards that there was like this huge story with Heineken and having like a trans, like,
Oh yeah, that happened last year.
Mhm.
I think it was Budweiser.
yeah. No, I think was it Budweiser?
Yeah.
It was like this whole thing. So it's interesting that you
Yeah,
talk
with
about that.
Dylan Mulvaney and the beer that they send them,
Because they
and
made,
all the backlash of
and then they were like, oh,
making
this
beer for
is
trans people and
right.
yeah, all that.
So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I mean, because the associations with. Here's an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
So beer was always a local thing.
Yeah.
Beer was always like super regional. Sometimes just to the point of different neighborhoods would have their own breweries because it was a fresh product that we didn't have the technology for pasteurization, we didn't have technology for refrigeration, so on and so forth. So the brewer was always somebody close to the community. We lost all that with industrialization because the United States was the only country that went through a recession, like the big recession, and prohibition, and those two things overlapped. So we not only stopped making local beer, but we stopped making beer. And when beer came back, it was only like the big companies that were able to do that because the small brewer who had a brewery at a local neighborhood was not able to live through the depression and also prohibition. They had to find something else to do. But the big companies did survive, and when beer made a comeback, it made it as a huge product. And the conversation was then driven by marketing and not by the brewers themselves.
Typical of America.
And that's how we went from beer being a local product to having labels with women in bikini and the advertisement being scantily dressed women because that you were selling a product, you were not selling beer. And then if you're marketing it that way, who's going to buy it? People for whom that is appealing. So beer became the domain of cis men, when traditionally that was never the case. It was always a communal thing.
You're so fucking cool. Continue being up to date with all things peace by following the links attached to this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's wrap up the show. So my final question to you is, what does peace look like? How are you producing peace? I mean, you sound like you're doing a lot of it, but this is my final question, so I have to ask.
Radical empathy, working on myself, on understanding, and constantly reflecting on my own opinions and biases, because we all have them. But if you're aware that you have them, you can work on them. As painful as that might be, but you can work on them. But if you think, oh, because I'm a good person, therefore what I do good, that's not true. Trying to be more empathetic, which is not something that comes easy or natural for me. It's something that I work on constantly.
Mm.
And even though I've been told that I'm a very empathetic person, I don't feel it that way.
Why?
I don't know. I just don't feel it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that I work on and I strive to get.
Hmm.
I don't think it's something that I have because it's in something that I have naturally.
Like you can't pinpoint what it is, but it's just part of like your natural
Yeah,
like characteristic.
yeah, and peace has so many dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about peace as I would like people to be treated and live with the same respect and dignity that I want and fight for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so peace to me is being able to extend that same courtesy to everyone,
Hmm.
even though I'm very much aware of the paradox of tolerance for those who are intolerant.
Mm-hmm.
So while I will strive to understand the circumstances of anyone that I might come across, I have zero tolerance for the intolerant.
Fair. Let's drink to that.
Cheers.
This is woo, brother.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your
and for your audience too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think one of the reasons why we have remained in contact throughout the years is because you are such a creative person.
Thank you.
And you are constantly trying to create peace, for sure.
Thank you.
And one of the things that I admire about you and that I recognize the second we started talking is how brave you are.
Thank you. I feel like bravery is such a interesting word. Because it can go in different ways, like brave for standing up, but sometimes it's like you have no choice but to be brave. So I think I always examine that word and I'm like, what is my relationship to it? So I see where you're coming from and I receive it. So thank you. Well, let the people know where they can find you, where they can keep up with you.
Well, if you want to come hang out and have a beer with me, I work at KCBC in Bushwick. We make great beer, and I'm usually there. Also, through Instagram, I'm at Rafa_Darmas. And that's basically it.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun.